off our list today, we have the Aggie bonfire collapse of 1999. The Aggie bonfire was, at one time, a long-standing tradition at Texas A&M University. Each year, around Thanksgiving, the bonfire was made to celebrate the university's annual football game. At first, the bonfires were small and unorganized events, but eventually it turned into a whole spectacle, and in 1969, the school even set a world record for having the largest bonfire. But all of that came to an end in 1999 when, during the construction of the bonfire, which was made out of wooden debris, it collapsed, killing 12 adults studying at the university and one former student, as well as severely injuring 27 others. After that, the bonfire celebration was banned from the campus. However, in 2002, the tradition started up again, but off campus and unsanctioned. Next up, we have Hurricane Ike, which in 2008 devastated parts of Texas, caused the death of over 80 people, and injured hundreds more. Although a warning was issued prior to the hurricane reaching the city, over 140 residents failed to evacuate the Texas Gulf Coast danger zones, likely due to fear of traffic jams. Winds of 110 miles per hour touched down in Texas in the morning of September 13th, causing massive waves which tossed boats out of the water and onto land with ease and damaged many houses along the shoreline. Not only that, but the hurricane caused a massive power outage that left somewhere between 2.8 to 4.5 million people without electricity for weeks up to months. In order to survive, many people had to climb trees, punch holes right through their attic ceiling in order to gain access to higher ground, and cling to floating debris so as to not get swept under by the rising waters. When the storm finally died down, an estimated 1,000 homes had been flooded in Texas, and the city of Galveston was declared uninhabitable. And the city of Houston imposed a week-long curfew for the safety of its citizens due to the power outage. Next up, we have the Sutherland Springs church tragedy, which took place on November 5th of 2017. During a service at the First Baptist Church, a local man named Devin Kelly entered the place of worship and opened fire on its congregants. He killed 26 people and injured 22 others before being hit by a projectile fired from the weapon of another local resident. After being hit, Kelly hopped in his car and fled the scene. Police trailed behind Kelly for some time in a high-speed car chase, but at some point during which Kelly seemingly gave up. But instead of allowing himself to get arrested, he instead turned his weapon on himself and took his own life. The event went down in history as the deadliest mass killing carried out with a firearm in Texas history, and the deadliest in an American place of worship. After the incident, it came to light that the perpetrator, Kelly, had obtained DV charges prior to purchasing his weapon, which should have rendered him unable to do so. And so in 2021, a federal judge ruled that the federal government had been negligent and awarded surviving victims and the families of the deceased nearly $250 million. Next up, we have the Texas fertilizer plant explosion of 2013. On April 18th in West Texas, a massive explosion at the West Texas fertilizer plant caused the deaths of at least 15 people and severely injured at least 200 others, with the majority of the deaths caused by the incident being that of firefighters and first responders who had arrived on the scene shortly after being alerted of the explosion. The blast also damaged 350 homes in the surrounding area. The explosion was the result of a fire breaking out in the company's fertilizer and seed building, which then came into contact with ammonium nitrate, which triggered the blast. But how the fire started is unknown. Investigators' theories go all the way from an electrical malfunction to arson. Further investigations also revealed that the plant had not disclosed that they had been storing ammonium nitrate on a facility sitting in such close proximity to nursing homes and learning centers, which had to be repaired and rebuilt after the blast, which was so intense it actually registered as an earthquake in West Texas and left a crater 10 feet deep and nearly 100 feet wide. Next up, we have the Walker Morocco siege of 1993. During the early 90s, a religious cult known as the Branch of Davidians, led by David Koresh, took up residency in the Mount Carmel Center Ranch in McLennan County, Texas. But the police suspected that there was a little more going on than misguided worship inside the walls of the ranch, and so they obtained search warrants for the compound as well as arrest warrants for David Koresh and many of his disciples. Here's the thing, a reporter caught wind of this and accidentally tipped off the brother of Koresh that police were on their way, and so by the time police arrived at the cult's headquarters, David Koresh of the Davidians and his disciples were armed and ready. When police attempted to raid the compound, 4 officers died and 8 Davidians were also killed. But they forgot to search the premises, and so the FBI stepped in. On April 19th of 1993, the FBI launched a tear gas attack, and shortly after, the compound went up in flames, causing the death of 76 cult followers, including the death of David himself. While at first the FBI came under scrutiny for causing the fire, it was later revealed that the fire had been started in a different part of the building by the Davidians themselves. How narcissistic do you have to be to call your cult your name? Strange. Next on the list, we have the Columbia explosion, which resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals and a 29-month suspension of the NASA Space Shuttle program and a serious reevaluation of procedures. The event took place on February 1st of 2003 after the Space Shuttle Columbia had been sent to the Hubble telescope so that its team could perform a routine servicing of the telescope, in this case replacing an aging power control unit, removing and installing solar arrays, and conducting instrument upgrades. The mission seemed like a success until Columbia began its re-entry into Earth's atmosphere over East Texas, during which time the space shuttle disintegrated, ending the lives of all 7 astronauts aboard the ship. While NASA first insisted that the astronauts would have been either asleep or unconscious at the time of their re-entry into the atmosphere and would therefore have died peacefully and suddenly, it was later revealed that they were very much awake and very much aware of their impending doom. Next up, we've got another hurricane, Hurricane Harvey, which in 2017 devastated the Texas Gulf Coast, causing even more damage than that caused by Hurricane Ike back in 2008. The Category 4 Hurricane Harvey hit the Texas Gulf Coast on August 25th. In total, 100 deaths occurred as a direct result of the hurricane, as well as many other indirect fatalities, and thousands of people were displaced from their homes. The storm, which made landfall in San Jose Island, lingered over Texas for several days, causing widespread and prolonged flooding. The damages caused along the coast exceeded $155 billion US. Much like during Ike, citizens living along the coast at the time of Hurricane Harvey were forced to reach the highest ground possible and had to survive on whatever foods or safe liquids they could find for days before they were rescued from the devastation. Harvey went down in history as the wettest tropical cyclone on record to hit not only Texas, but the United States as a whole to date. Next up, we have the Fort Hood killing, which took place at Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos, a military base in Killeen, Texas. On November 5th of 2009, Nadel Hassan, a U.S. Army major and psychiatrist, opened fire at Fort Hood, killing 13 and injuring more than 30 others. This event went down in history as the deadliest terror attack to occur on an American military base, and for a while it was the deadliest attack in the United States since the September 11 attacks, until it was surpassed in 2015 by the San Bernardino attack in California. During the attack, Hassan himself was hit, resulting in him becoming paralyzed from the waist down. He was arraigned by military court and charged with 15 counts of killing in the first degree, as well as 32 other accounts of attempted killing. He was found guilty and sentenced to death, but the story doesn't end there. Days after the attack, it was discovered that the Joint Terror Task Force had been well aware of a series of emails between Hassan and a known security threat, Anwar al-Awlaki, which led to an internal investigation of the FBI. Next, we have probably one of the most infamous incidents of American history to ever occur in Texas. It's the assassination of JFK on November 22nd of 1993 at the Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. JFK, or John F. Kennedy, was the 35th president of the United States and just one of 4 to be killed while in office. He was riding in a presidential procession of vehicles with his wife Jacqueline, or Jackie Kennedy, when the former US president was hit in the head by a projectile fired from a handheld weapon off-site. He was rushed to the hospital but ultimately pronounced dead just 30 minutes after the incident. An official investigation into the death of JFK concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald had killed him and that he had acted alone. No reason was ever given, though, as to why Oswald might have wanted the president dead, as just 2 days after Oswald was accused of the act, he was killed by an American nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, who was sentenced to death for killing Oswald. And so there is no real way of knowing whether Oswald really did act alone or what his motives would have been in doing so. There's a lot of conspiracies surrounding the whole thing. If you guys want to see a video on that, you know where to let me know. And finally, to finish us off today, we have the Phillips Petroleum explosion of 1986. On October 23rd, the Phillips Petroleum Company suffered majorly after a series of explosions occurred at their chemical complex in Pasadena, Texas, near the Houston Ship Channel. The blasts were so bad, the first one actually registered as a 3.5 on the Richter scale, which is normally reserved for measuring the intensity of earthquakes. And the fires that broke out as a result of the explosion took 10 hours to get under control, likely due to the fact that the blast devastated many water pipes and fire hydrants in the area. The initial explosion, which led to the others in a devastating chain reaction that caused the death of 23 employees and the severe injuries of 314 more, was caused by a release of extremely flammable process gases used to produce plastic used in food containers. Lovely. Think about that the next time you're putting plastic in the microwave. PSA. The company was fined $5,666,200 US by the United States Occupational Safe and Health Administration for their negligence that resulted in the fire. Not a good day in history for big plastic. Starting off our list today, we have the Texas killing fields. As the name implies, people died there. At least 30, but possibly more. This stretch of land that covers 25 acres is located just outside of Texas City. It is vast, barren, vacant, and apparently the perfect place to hide a body. Since the 1930s, many young women have gone missing in the area surrounding the fields, and while some remain missing to this day, many of the women's bodies have been found discarded in said fields. The first discovery was made in 1984. A dog carried something its owner originally thought was a ball out of the field, but it turned out to be a human skull. And after that, the floodgates opened. Clyde Edwin Hendrick, John Robert King, Peter Zwarst, Kevin Edinson Smith, and William Lewis Reese were all arrested and imprisoned for separate killings, except for King and Zwarst, who had worked together, meaning that only a total of 4 killings have been solved to date. The killers of the remaining victims, as well as the remaining victims' identities, remain unsolved to this day. Next up, we've got Alton Bridge, also known as Goatman Bridge, located between the Texas cities of Denton and Copper Canyon. The bridge was used from the 1930s all the way up to 2001 when it was closed for vehicle traffic. So yes, it's abandoned, but how has it earned itself a spot on our list today? Well, it's got a pretty dark past, which I will tell you about now. The legend goes that in August of 1938, a successful goat breeder who went by the name of Goatman, but whose real name was Oscar Washburn, hung a sign up on the bridge that read, "This way to the Goatman," which apparently severely pissed off a local radical hate group that I can't say the name of here on YouTube, but they wore white pointed hoods and they were terrible. Probably know who I'm talking about. Well, one of the members of that group took Washburn by force. They brought him to the Alton Bridge and ended his life. They threw him over the side of the bridge, but when they looked down to catch a glimpse of his body, he was nowhere to be found. Enraged, the group made their way to his home and killed his entire family. Since this alleged incident, many people have claimed on many separate occasions to have seen the ghost of Oscar Washburn leading his flock across the bridge in the middle of the night. Next up, we have the Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, which is probably one of the most famously abandoned places in the state, according to the internet. Although it's no longer abandoned today, actually it's now a health spa, it was abandoned between the years of 1972 and 2019. The hotel opened its doors in 1929, welcoming people from all over who were attracted to this so-called crazy water with healing powers found in the town of Mineral Wells. Many spirits are said to haunt the hotel, including T.D. Baker, who died in his room of unknown causes after his mistress flung herself from a 7th floor window. Another apparition who calls the hotel home is a bellhop who was cut in half during an elevator accident back in the 1950s. If you already have a fear of elevators, I'm so sorry, that's super gross. Another is a young man who died of leukemia while staying at the hotel. Reports of red lipstick smears appearing out of nowhere, broken glass, windows opening and shutting on their own, along with legitimate ghost sightings, continue to fascinate visitors of the area and the hotel, both in its abandoned and reopened state. Next up, we have Stewart Mansion, located in Galveston Island, Texas. This area has a rough history. Before the grounds became the resting place of the Stewart Mansion, they had been the campsite of the Karankawa tribe, who were perhaps most well known for eating human flesh. The tribe was also killed on the land by John Lafitte's pirate colony in a gruesome battle. And if that's not bad enough, legend says that the father of the Stewart family went mad and killed his wife and sons, and then allegedly buried them all inside the walls of the mansion before taking his own life shortly thereafter. Many people who visit the now abandoned attraction claim to see the ghosts of the Karankawa peoples along with the ghosts of deceased pirates, as well as a voodoo priestess who many believe was a prisoner of the pirate colony, and of course the ghosts of the Stewarts, who are said to walk the halls regretfully and mournfully. Next up, at our halfway point today, we have the USS Lexington, an Essex-class aircraft carrier, say that 5 times fast, which during the Second World War participated in almost every major operation in the Pacific Theater, which was kind of the Asia-Pacific Wars, and it spent a total of 21 months in combat. As you can imagine, the massive 872-foot vessel has seen a lot of action in its day, but on its final day at sea, the vessel was hit by 2 torpedoes in its hull and it began to sink. 216 crewmen were killed and 2,735 were evacuated. In true naval fashion, the captain, Felix Stump, was the last to disembark the vessel. He did survive, but died of cancer many years later. Thanks to fundraising efforts, the abandoned ship was eventually retrieved from the ocean floor and converted into a museum, which has been referred to as the most haunted in America. It's said that anyone who enters the ship will feel the presence of those who died on board. Next on our list, we have the Old Yorktown Memorial Hospital, which opened in 1951 and was abandoned in 1990, but eventually reopened many years later as a tourist attraction, meaning you can visit it if you want. While this is the case, many people believe that the hospital was never truly vacant, as even after its closure, it was home to the many ghosts that continue to roam its halls. In fact, the attraction is so haunted, it actually appeared numerous times on the reality television show Ghost Adventures. If you guys watch that, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I've never seen it. Perhaps the most famous story that outlines the horrors of the hospital would have to be the one detailing the incompetence of Dr. Leon Norwierski, who slit a patient's throat while performing a procedure on their neck. Whether or not this was an accident is highly debated. Was he incompetent or was he malicious? I don't know. I always like to think incompetence, but the ghost of the deceased patient is said to vengefully roam the halls of the former hospital. And the hospital is also home to a gaggle of ghost nuns who are super strict, and they punish those wearing unacceptable hospital clothing and sporting tattoos by pushing, scratching, or forcing them out of the building. Next up, we have Presidio Nuestra Senora de Loretta de Bahia, a fort whose name I will not be attempting to pronounce again, that was constructed in Texas by the Spanish Army in 1747. And it's the site of the Goliad event, which took place during the Texas Revolution and resulted in the deaths of somewhere between 425 to 445 people. Those who died were Texian army soldiers, prisoners of war to the Mexican army. The hundreds of men were killed with projectiles piled up and set on fire. It's a pretty dark past, so it probably comes as no surprise that the area is obviously super haunted, but what might shock you is the fact that it isn't said to be haunted by any of the men, but rather a woman who lost her lover during the gruesome event. She wanders the grounds of the fort, helplessly searching the graves for a name that can't be found. Many who visit the grounds have also reported hearing cannon fire, banging on the walls, and the strong smell of BLOOD near the fort chapel's courtyard. I'm sorry you guys, I can't say these words on here. Next up, we have a name I can definitely pronounce, Donkey Lady Bridge. We had Goatman and now we've got Donkey Lady. It's located 30 miles southwest of San Antonio, and the bridge is said to be the final resting place of a woman who was raised by donkeys after being abandoned by her parents. In 2006, the San Antonio Express released an article recounting her story. It appears as though while out one day, one of the woman's donkeys bit a man's son. The father was furious and later ambushed the woman and her donkey on the bridge, causing her to fall in the river and drowned. Many people have said that if you drive to the bridge today, turn off your car engine, you'll hear the cries of the woman and her donkey. If you have tried it, if you do try it, let me know. Starting off our top 2, we have the Toyah Ghost Town. At its peak in 1910, the town was home to a whopping 1,052 people. Not that much. But today the number has dwindled down to just 57. This is possibly due to the 2004 tornado that devastated the town, leaving the majority of the homes and the volunteer fire department abandoned. While this might sound pretty basic, those who live in the town today tell of something pretty extraordinary. Dark, but extraordinary. Locals believe that the town is occupied by entities, young people with pitch black eyes that go around the town at night, terrorizing its residents, knocking on doors and staring through windows, instilling fear into whoever might meet their gaze. It has been said that this is the true reason for the town's near total abandonment back in the early 2000s, but of course, I want to know what you think. And finally, to finish off our list today, we have the former Williamson County Jail circa 1888. The jail was home to some of Texas's most notorious criminals, including Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have taken the life of 35 people in the year 1982. It's a busy guy if he did it in just 1 year. The crime rate at the time was out of control, so much so that the jail became quickly overcrowded. So overcrowded, in fact, that it became incredibly easy for inmates to slip out of the prison undetected, only to continue their reign of terror on the Williamson County people. Luckily for the locals, the majority of escaped convicts were recaptured. Unlucky for the convicts, as the majority of them were sentenced to death by lethal injection, electric chair, and the old rope and tree. But you guys know by now, I can't say that word on here. The jail was abandoned in 1971, but it later reopened as county offices, and it has been told that the deceased inmates now haunt the building, throwing binders and books from shelves and lunches off of desks. It seems like they're still kind of holding a bit of a grudge against the members of state. If you're feeling a bit disappointed at the fact that no, it's technically no longer abandoned, it once was though, so that's why it's on this list, I will give you some solace in knowing that the building is actually open for public tours during the fall season, so do with that what you will.
Elmendorf, Texas was the home of Joe Ball, who committed a series of gruesome crimes in the 30s. Now this is an absolutely insane case here. I'm sure viewers from Texas are very familiar with Joe Ball, but I'd never heard of this story, and I'm pretty surprised that it's not more well known. So Joe Ball was a serial killer. He has a couple interesting nicknames: the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man, both of which fit. He fought in World War I, and when he returned to Texas, he started making money as a bootlegger. Then, when Prohibition ended, he opened a saloon. At the back, he built a pond where he kept 6 alligators. He'd often feed live cats and dogs to the gators, but that didn't satisfy him for long. Soon, women in the area started going missing, including his own wife. Now, in 1938, 2 county sheriffs arrived at his property to question him about several of these missing women, and Ball pulled out a pistol and took his own life. But a handyman of Joe's, Clifford Wheeler, told authorities about how he'd assisted Ball in disposing of the bodies of 2 women who he'd killed, feeding them to his alligators. It's believed Joe Ball may have taken the lives of at least 20 women.
Next up, we have a small town in Texas that was once home to a lesser known but incredibly gruesome serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have killed over 3,000 individuals during his criminal career, which spanned from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Also known as the Confession Killer or Highway Stalker, Lee Lucas was born in Blacksford, Virginia, and at a young age lost his father to hypothermia, and so his mother was forced to raise him on her own. Clearly, Henry wasn't happy with this, as his mother was the first person he killed in 1960 in Michigan. He was sent to prison but only served 10 years due to overcrowding. And that's when he moved to Ringgold, Texas with his niece Frida Powell to work for a sick woman named Katie Rich, both of whom he would later kill. While he claimed to have ended the lives of thousands of individuals through restricting airways, impaling them with sharp objects, blunt force, and hit and runs, he was convicted of only 11 killings.
Texarkana is home to one of the creepiest cases in the state's history, the Texarkana Moonlight Killer case. So this case was heavy inspiration for slasher movies that would come years later, along with tons of urban legends. The killer literally wore a sack with holes cut out for his eyes and would attack innocent couples while their cars were parked in an area called Lover's Lane. It's about as classic as it gets. So the first attack happened on February 22nd, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollisand and his girlfriend Mary Jean Larry, were attacked by a man with a pillowcase over his head carrying a firearm. Jimmy was pistol whipped and very injured, and Mary was attacked, but the two lived. Many of the other victims wouldn't be so lucky though. He would attack 6 other people, and it all happened in a period of 10 weeks. The assailant became known as the Phantom of Texarkana, and the case was never solved. Now we move on to Kerrville, Texas, with the case of Janine Jones, a nurse who also terrorized San Antonio. What an absolute creep this woman is. Yes, she is still alive. She took the lives of an estimated 60 young patients in her care between 1970 and 1982. She'd inject patients with a variety of substances that would cause cardiac arrest. She first started working as a licensed vocational nurse at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. But hospital staff started realizing that an abnormal amount of young patients were dying in Jones's care. Now, here's where things get really infuriating. An investigation could have been carried out right there and then, and things could have ended here. But the hospital didn't want any negative attention, and they certainly did not want to be sued. So instead of alerting authorities, they asked all of their current LVNs to resign and then rehired exclusively registered nurses to take control of the pediatric ICU. This meant that Jones could just move on and start working at another hospital, which she did. So more young patients died at her hands at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. There, a doctor finally found she'd been accessing lethal amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. So in 1985, she was finally convicted and is now serving life in prison.
Circling right on back to Yorktown, it appears as though this particular town is home to not only an incredibly haunted hospital, but also an incredibly disturbing creature known as a Wendigo. Although the creature is best described in Algonquin folklore, which is Canadian for my Americans on this channel, many locals of the town claim to have seen one of the beasts. Many people have compared the Wendigo to a skinwalker, as it is tall and lanky and somewhat humanoid, but can shapeshift and has been known to devour human flesh. And when a Wendigo finds the body of a deceased hiker, it will often inhabit it, and then turn to killing those who attempt to come into contact with its human exterior. Many people also claim to have seen the demon take the form of animals and follow and stalk them throughout the area. Stay safe out there in Wendigo. Next up, surprise, surprise, it's another creepy hospital. Worley Hospital in Pampa, Texas. The institution was opened in 1928 but closed its doors in the 1970s due to lack of revenue. After 40 years of sitting abandoned, the building has become quite a talking point for the town's locals, who claim that it is haunted by patients who died within its walls during its 42 years of operation. After many townspeople reported seeing a black silhouette in the window of the abandoned building, ghost hunters began to take interest. Those who have entered entered have been greeted with decrepit and decaying walls, ceilings, and floors that have been heavily vandalized. But it appears as though trespassers aren't the only ones to make their way through the empty halls of the once surgically specialized facility. Many of the patients who died within the building's walls, as well as a 25-year-old nurse who was poisoned while working at the hospital, are said to roam the grounds. People have reported seeing demonic creatures stalking them while exploring the floors of the hospitals, with the majority of the activity taking place on the 3rd floor, where surgeries would have been performed when the hospital was running. Oh, and the current owner of the grounds wants to renovate the building into a ministry. Coincidence? I do not think so. And finally, we have a man with a thing for eyes. Stealing them, that is. It all started in the 1990s in a rural area of Dallas. Is it a town? Not really, but this case is pure evil, so listen up. During the 90s, sex workers began turning up dead at an alarming rate, with one very striking thing in common. You guessed it, their eyes had been completely removed from their sockets. The killer was Charles Albright, also known as the eyeball killer. When he was young, Charles had quite the knack for taxidermy. He would stuff many animals a week, doing his best to make them look pristine, but there was one thing missing: eyes. His mother refused to buy glass eyes for the animals, and so instead Charles would use buttons. When he got a little older, he slept with an sex worker, which led to him getting a transmitted infection. I feel like the pieces are starting to come together. His obsession with the eyes and his hatred for women of this certain profession grew exponentially over the years, and on December 13th of 1990, he took his first life. After violating the woman, he fired a projectile from a handheld weapon, execution style, into the back of her head and carefully removed the eyes of the victim with what has been described as surgical precision. Charles was convicted of 1 killing, but most likely committed at least 3. He was sentenced to death and was executed in August of 2022.
The Servant Girl Annihilator, the Austin Axe Killer, the Midnight Assassin, these were all names given to one of the earliest serial killers in the United States, an unidentified assailant who terrorized Austin, Texas between 1884 and 1885, 3 years before Jack the Ripper. The killer would attack his victims while they slept in their beds, hacking them up with an axe. The majority of his victims were mainly black women. The spree only stopped when additional police were hired to patrol the streets at night and residents formed their own vigilance committee. In total, the Servant Girl Annihilator was responsible for 8 deaths. He also severely injured 6 other women and 2 men. But the killer was never caught or identified. There were all kinds of theories floating around at the time. Some local voodoo practitioners believed that he had the power of invisibility, because no dogs in the homes or surrounding areas where he'd attacked had barked. He seemed to just almost move entirely silently. And in 1888, after Jack the Ripper had killed Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, another theory came about that the Austin Axe Killer and Jack the Ripper were actually the same guy. Carl Eugene Watts isn't a name that usually comes up in the lists of the worst American serial killers in history, but he's actually one of the most prolific. Born in 1953 in Killeen, Texas, Watts began his spree in 1974. He'd kidnap his victims from their homes and torment them for prolonged periods before finally killing them, usually by strangulation, bludgeoning, or drowning. Most of his victims were young white women who he described later in court as having, quote, evil eyes. He'd attack in different jurisdictions, often crossing into different states. He became known as the Sunday Morning Slasher and operated for about 8 years before finally being caught. Police weren't able to connect him to every killing he was suspected of carrying out, which could be over 100, but he did receive a life sentence, dying in prison of prostate cancer in 2007. On December 13th, 1990, a lady of the night, Mary Lou Pratt, was found dead in the Oak Cliff neighborhood in Dallas. She'd been killed with a firearm, but the most disturbing part, both of her eyes had been carefully removed. Then, just 2 months later, another woman of the night, Susan Peterson, was found dead just outside of Dallas. Once again, her eyes had been carefully surgically removed. There was obviously a pattern now, and the assailant became one of the most wanted criminals in the state. Finally, just 1 month later, a third woman was found dead, lying on her side near a school. Once again, no eyes. A major breakthrough in the case came when a woman tipped off the police about a man named Charles Frederick Albright, who was known to have a strange fascination with eyes, and he'd also known the first victim, Mary Lou Pratt. A number of other courtesans said that Albright had been violent with them, so this was enough to get a search warrant. In Albright's home, police found that he'd removed the eyes from several photographs and dolls. He also had a history with the law going back to when he was just a teenager, mostly for robbery. He was only ever tied to one of these killings officially, but it's pretty clear he was responsible for all three. He was sentenced to life without parole and died in prison in 2020. Dean Corll, aka the Candy Man. He operated between 1970 and 1973, known to have killed a minimum of 28 young men in Houston and Pasadena. He'd lure his victims by offering them a ride, or he'd invite them to a party. Now, it's easy to say don't get into a car with a stranger, but the thing is, Corll would acquaint himself with a number of his victims before picking them up and taking them to his home, where he'd torment and kill them. And if he didn't know them himself, they'd be friends or acquaintances of his accomplices. Yeah, he didn't operate alone. He had two young men, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, helping him. Once his victims were in his home, he'd give them various substances until they'd pass out, then he'd handcuff them to his bed, have his way with them, or torment them until finally taking their lives. Sometimes this would be drawn out for days. Well, it finally came to an end when one of his accomplices, Elmer Wayne Henley, grabbed Corll's firearm and turned it on him. Henley told him, "You've gone far enough, Dean. I can't go on any longer. I can't have you kill all my friends." Corll began stepping towards Henley, daring him to shoot, not believing he would, but Henley did. Corll tried to run out of the room, but Henley fired 3 more times, killing him instantly. Good riddance. Janine Jones was a nurse who worked with young patients, and this makes her case incredibly disturbing because a nurse is just the last person you'd be expecting to intentionally cause you harm. She's believed to have caused the deaths of around 60 young patients between 1970 and 1982. She did this by administering unneeded substances like dioxin and heparin into her patients. She started her career at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio, but people started getting suspicious when a larger than normal number of young patients were dying under her care. Now, instead of reporting her, the hospital just quietly kind of let her go to avoid bad publicity and potential lawsuits, which is insane. Then Jones found a job at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. Luckily, her suspicious behavior didn't go unchecked there, though. A doctor discovered she had been accessing dangerous amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. Eventually, in 1985, she was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Joe Ball became known as the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man. This case goes back to the 1930s in Texas. Joe Ball was a former soldier who turned to bootlegging after World War I and later opened a saloon when Prohibition ended. And behind his saloon, he kept a pond with 6 alligators, where he would sometimes feed them live cats and dogs for entertainment purposes. That's already evil on its own, but it seems it just wasn't satisfying Joe Ball's thirst for cruelty because things went even further. Women in the area, including his very own wife, began to disappear. In 1938, 2 county sheriffs came to question Ball about the missing women, and he panicked, ending his own life with a pistol. After Ball's death, his handyman Clifford Wheeler came forward and confessed to helping Ball dispose of the bodies of 2 women by feeding them to his alligators. It's suspected that Ball may have been responsible for the deaths of up to 20 women. Thank God this next guy was put to death. Anthony Allen Shore, a complete and utter sicko. He mainly operated in Houston, forcing himself on several young women and girls between 1986 in 1995. He would strangle his victims before dumping their bodies. He wasn't investigated until 1998 when he was convicted of harming his own 2 daughters. He was required to provide DNA to authorities who were then able to link him to victims of his then unsolved crimes. After 11 hours of interrogation, Shore had given authorities everything they needed. It took the jury less than an hour to decide to put Anthony Allen Shore to death, and in 2004, he was put down by lethal injection. Edward Harold Bell was born in 1939 in southern Texas. He was responsible for a long list of disturbing crimes, but most notably for having killed 11 girls throughout Houston, Galveston, Webster, and Dickinson between 1971 and 1977. He revealed these crimes in 1998 in a series of letters, which he sent to prosecutors in Galveston and Harris counties. The cases had been unsolved at the time, and the details Bell outlined matched the circumstances of the cases. The first killing Bell detailed took place in 1971. He killed 2 girls in Galveston, Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson, dumping their remains close to a deserted bridge. The 2 had been reported missing after accepting a ride from a man in a white van. At the time, Bell had owned a white van. Bell was never convicted for any of the killings he detailed in these letters, but he was already in prison for having killed a Marine named Larry Dickens, who had been attempting to restrain him after having flashed several young women from inside his car. And it's worse than that, but I can't really go into details here, nor would I really want to. Now, he'd actually managed to escape this incident and was a wanted fugitive. He wasn't caught until an episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired about the case, and someone who knew Bell tipped off the police. Angel Resendez, aka the Railroad Killer, was on the FBI's most wanted fugitives list before finally surrendering to Texas authorities on July 13th of 1999. He carried out at least 23 killings while train hopping across the southern US and Mexico between 86 and 99. Resendez would hop on freight trains traveling from one place to another and would often target people living near railway tracks. He would break into homes or attack people he encountered, leaving just a trail of violence in his wake. And what made Resendez particularly dangerous was his ability to evade capture, because he was constantly moving and crossing state lines. Law enforcement agencies across different states really struggled to coordinate and apprehend him. And an extra creepy thing about him was that he liked getting to know his victims after killing them, usually looking at their driver's licenses and other forms of ID, and then taking sentimental items from their homes. He was a real creep. His reign of terror finally ended in 1999, and he died of lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas in 2006. The Phantom of Texarkana, the Phantom Killer, the Phantom Slayer. He has many monikers, but his real identity is still a complete mystery. The Phantom Killer stalked young couples in the Texarkana region between February 22nd and May 3rd of 1946. Each attack targeted young couples in isolated spots on weekend nights. The attacks occurred every 3 to 4 weeks. In the first attack on February 22nd, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked in a secluded area when a man wearing a white cloth mask approached them. He ordered them out of the car, hit Jimmy on the head with a firearm, and forced himself on Mary using the barrel of his firearm. Luckily, both Jimmy and Mary survived this attack. In the second attack on March 24th, Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore were found dead in Griffin's car. They'd been shot outside the car and then placed back inside. The third attack on April 14th involved Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. Martin was found shot multiple times. Booker was found shot twice, both with the same type of pistol used in the previous attack. The final attack on May 3rd resulted in the deaths of Virgil and Katie Starks in their home. Katie had actually taken 2 bullets to the face, but had managed to run out of the home and get help. That was the last attack, but not because the assailant was caught. For some reason, he just stopped. The case has never been solved. When you hear Lake Worth monster, you're probably picturing a sea creature of some kind, but no, it's a goat man. The creature is said to reside in Lake Worth, just outside of Fort Worth. It's described as this bizarre mix of a man and goat, but also has scales, so it's like a fishy man-goat. The legend dates back to July of 1969, when locals reported sightings of this half-human, half-goat creature perched on a cliff. A young couple who'd parked their car by the lake were the first ones to see the creature. They said it was massive, about 7 feet tall, and then more and more reported sightings came in, saying the goat creature would leap onto cars and hurl tires at people. Then in October of 69, a man named Alan Plaster snapped a photo of what he claimed to be the Lake Worth monster. Supposedly, this is it, and this photo started showing up in newspapers and magazines, which just fueled the stories even further until crowds were flocking to the lake at night. But whatever this thing was, if it really did exist, it was never found. The Lady of White Rock Lake. I'm sure Dallas locals will have heard of this one. White Rock Lake is about 20 minutes out of town, a nice getaway from the city, but there's a very spooky ghost story attached to it. As the legend goes, back in 1952, a tired couple found themselves driving home late one night after a party. The wife was dozing off when their car abruptly came to a halt. In the middle of the road was a woman in a torn white gown, drenched from head to toe. The husband offered her a ride, and she accepted. The wife was shocked at how icy the woman's touch was as she helped her into the back seat. They drove in silence until they reached the address that the woman gave them, an eerie, deserted house at the end of a desolate road. But when they turned to the back seat to speak to the woman, she was gone, leaving only a puddle of water behind. The couple was pretty freaked out, but figured maybe the woman had somehow gotten out of the car without them noticing, so they decided to knock on the door of the house. An old man answered the door, and when they described the woman to him, he told them the woman they had picked up was his daughter, but that she had drowned years ago in a boating accident. Ever since then, drivers have reported picking up a woman on the side of the road only for her to vanish before reaching her destination, always leaving a pool of water behind. The Frio River Valley is known for its own urban legend, the White Lady of Rio Frio. Maria Jimenez lived with her sister and brother-in-law, Gregorio, happily tending to her nieces and nephews on their ranch, but she dreamed of one day marrying and having children of her own. But Gregorio, despite being married, and married to Maria's sister no less, became infatuated with Maria. But when she rejected him, he flew into a rage and fatally shot her at her home later in the day. At her funeral, Maria's sister decided to dress her sister in her white wedding gown, as Maria never got to have a wedding of her own. It's said that Maria haunts the valley to this day, still wearing her sister's white wedding dress. But unlike a lot of tragic ghost tales like this, Maria isn't a vengeful spirit. She's just as caring and kind as she was in life. It's said she helps guide and comfort young people lost in the valley. Because she was unable to fulfill her own dream of starting a family, her spirit is said to care for the young people of her entire hometown. It's said you can spot her on misty nights, gracefully hovering over the water with her dress trailing behind her. The Lechuza is a creature from Mexican folklore, a large, part woman, part owl-like bird creature with dark magical powers. But in Robstown, Texas, in 1975, this creature became one of the biggest urban legends in the Lone Star State. Back in October of that year, the police started getting some unusual calls. People were reporting sightings of what they described as a monstrous bird. In Mexican folklore, the Lechuza is believed to be a witch who can take on the form of an owl, but she keeps her human face and hair. Depending on who you ask, she could be the size of a regular owl or as big as a person. But the reports didn't specifically mention La Lechuza at the time. That connection wasn't made until later. Instead, they described something that sounded just like a cross between a bird and a human. In Robstown, witnesses said it stood anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall, with a bird body but a human-like face. There were also supposed sightings later on in Banquet and Alice. By January of the following year, folks in the valley were reporting encounters with a massive bird. In San Benito, 2 police officers even saw a bird with a wingspan that was apparently 10 to 12 feet long, flying over a lagoon. A radio station even put up a reward for capturing the big bird alive. And in Brownsville, a man named Alverico Gajardo told reporters he came face to face with a big bird right outside his door about 4 feet tall, saying it had a beak like a spear and eyes as big as silver dollars. He described his experience, saying, "That animal is not from this world. I was scared." This mystery man was apparently an incredible dancer. The ladies were blown away by his incredible moves. They all wanted to dance with him. But at one point in the night, one of his dance partners happened to look down at the man's feet, and suddenly everyone heard this loud shriek. I picture the music stopping, everyone's just freezing, looking over. The woman had looked down at the man to see that his feet had transformed. Some said they looked like chicken feet, others described them more as hooves. The man then rushed into the bathroom and was never seen again. Some say he'd climbed out of the bathroom window, running off into the night, but there was also smoke left behind with a strange sulfur-like smell. The building is no longer a nightclub. It's changed hands a number of times, but the story of the dancing devil continued to be told, and staff at the building would say that there was a lingering sulfuric smell, especially in the men's bathroom. Next, we have the tale of the fang creature of Old Pearsall Road. Back in the 60s, a group of friends were driving home late one night along Old Pearsall Road. And by the way, if I'm pronouncing anything incorrectly, you let me know I already know you're gonna let me know in the comments. Anyway, they were driving along the road. They'd had a few drinks, this group of friends, and suddenly the driver swerved, convinced that he'd seen a little person in a white shirt and diaper with red stains around its mouth. After regaining their composure, the group continued on home. The next day, though, the driver just couldn't get the image of whatever that thing was out of his mind. Had he just imagined it? Was it an animal of some kind? Or even worse, was there actually a little youngster alone in the middle of the road that night that he almost ran over? He decided to drive back out there to take a look. But once he reached the spot, he realized he'd suffered a flat tire. He got out of the car to find 2 puncture marks on it. He changed the tire and then settled back into his car. He hadn't gotten a great sleep the night before, so he started to drift off, still pulled over on the side of the road. But then he woke up to a sharp pain on his neck. In complete horror, he realized the creature from the night before was now perched on his lap. Legend has it that the driver's sister later had a dream where he warned her never to venture down Old Pearsall Road. Bowden Road in Huntsville is sometimes referred to ominously as Demon's Road. There's a lot said to go on here. Seriously, be careful driving along this road alone at night, because it sounds like you're taking a real risk. For starters, you have a ghost boy with glowing red eyes that's said to ride around on a tricycle and drag you to hell. Some people will claim to spot mysterious red lights and orbs along the road. There's a faceless monster that's said to stalk people walking or driving along it. And then there's the graveyard. Martha Chapel Cemetery. One story goes that in 2001, a man from Houston decided to visit the Martha Chapel Cemetery with his buddy. They parked near the graveyard. The driver stepped out of the car. His friend appeared to be sleeping in the passenger seat, and he didn't want to disturb him. So the man started walking through the cemetery. But he noticed something strange happening near one of the graves. The ground seemed to be moving. Suddenly, a hand reached up out of the ground and grabbed him on the ankle, but his friend ended up rushing over to help, and together they managed to break free and kick the hand back down into the ground. They ran back to the car, but suddenly the driver froze. His friend was actually still in the car. He'd been asleep the whole time. At least that's what it looked like. It wasn't until they were about a mile down Demon's Road that the driver realized his friend was actually dead. He'd suffered a heart attack while en route to the cemetery. Finally, we have another haunted Corpus Christi hotspot, Center Theater. Legend has it that the spirit of a woman employed as an usher at this theater still lingers to this day, bound to the theater after a terrible accident. According to the story, the woman died at the hands of her jealous lover. As she exited the woman's restroom on the upper floor near the mezzanine, she was fatally stabbed, her white uniform now stained in red. Visitors to the theater have reported strange things, especially in the area near the top of the stairs overlooking the seats. It's said that this is where the woman's ghost is most likely to be spotted. But she doesn't like people hanging around up there. Some are lucky to only feel an unexplained chill in the air. Others say they've been pushed, only to turn around and find that there's nobody else with them up there. At least no one living.
Starting off our list today, we have the city of Dallas, which in the late 1990s was home to the infamous eyeball killer Charles Frederick Albright, born in Amarillo in the year 1933. He grew up troubled with a knack for taxidermy and an anger towards his parents for never buying him fake eyes to use in his projects, and instead forcing him to sew buttons on his carefully curated, glorified, and gruesome stuffed animals. As he got older, Albright became interested in adult activity, and so he decided to procure the services of a professional. But she gave him an infection and he was pissed. A few years later, on December 13th of 1990, his anger turned to action. He violated and killed a working woman before carefully and completely removing her eyes from the sockets. 2 months later, another worker was discovered missing her eyes, and a month after that, a third. Eventually, a tip led police to Albright, but despite evidence found in his truck linking him to all three killings, he was only charged with the death of his first victim. He was sentenced to death for his crimes and was executed in August of 2020. Next up, we've got the head hacker of Houston, Texas, of course, a man or men responsible for the deaths of 5 women in Houston during 1979. The first death to occur that year was a woman found dead in her home, tied to her bed with a pillow covering her face, or at least that's what Bob Smith, who found the body, thought. Unfortunately for him and the victim, Elise Elaine Rankin, when he lifted the pillow, he quickly realized that her head had been hacked off, and signs of forced adult activity were also present on the victim. 2 weeks later, another corpse was found in the same building, just 2 floors up. Mary Michael Calcutta, who was found in her bedroom, fully clothed with her throat cut open, head intact though. That same day, Doris Lynn Threadgill was found dead inside her townhouse, her throat cut so badly that her head was almost completely separated from her body. A few months later, Joan Huffman was found dead in a local park, and on the same day, a man named Robert Sprangenberger was found inside the trunk of a white Dodge car with his head completely removed from his shoulders. Whether or not the killings were done by the same person or a group of people working together, or perhaps they had nothing to do with each other at all, remains a complete mystery to this day. Next up, we have Irving, Texas, the setting of a Taco Bell robbery gone wrong, which took place back in 1991. On January 6th of that year, 2 men, Jesse San Miguel and Jerome Green, forced their way into the local Taco Bell and then forced 4 employees into the restaurant's walk-in freezer. Miguel and Green then ransacked the establishment, emptying all the registers and shoving anything valuable they could find into bags. Initially, the 2 had agreed that neither one of them were going to cause any harm to the employees, but before they left, San Miguel had a change of heart. He returned to the walk-in freezer and asked the 4 victims to give him a good reason why he shouldn't kill them, before firing at and killing them one by one at close range. Miguel and Green then fled the scene, but they were arrested just a few hours later. Miguel was sentenced to death and executed on June 9th of 2000, and Green was sentenced to 50 years behind bars. Next up, we have Childress, Texas, which between 1988 and 1991 became infamous for a series of assumed satanic-based crimes. The first death to occur in the town was that of Tate Roland, who was found dangling from a tree. Police ruled that Tate had taken his own life despite his friends and family insisting that there was no way that could be the case. But police suspicions did begin to rise when Tate's sister, Terry Trosper, was found dead in her bed after having choked on her own vomit after ingesting substances used to treat anxiety and major depressive disorder. Rumors had been flying around town that Tate had been a member of a local satanic cult, and one person claimed that they had even seen the young man eating a Bible. And the suspicions of his involvement in dark worship only grew after his funeral, which was attended by unknown people who were heard chanting under their breaths during the service. Soon after, a friend of Tate's deceased sister Terry was also found dead with a note that read, "I know something that the cops don't know. I know who killed Terry. I can't live anymore." After the new information, police re-autopsied Tate's body and found that he had ingested the same substance as Terry prior to his death. And a closer inspection of Terry revealed that she had been violated before her death. Although the police now fully believed that foul play was clearly a factor in the two deaths of the brother and sister, no arrest was ever made. But authorities did put out pamphlets outlining what to look for in cases of ritualistic killings. Next up, we've got the Lubby's Cafe killings, which took place in Killeen, Texas. On October 16th of 1991, George Hennard drove his pickup truck right through the window of Lubby's Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas before open firing on patrons of the restaurant, which resulted in the deaths of 23 people. When police arrived, he entered into a violent standoff with the officers. He fired, they fired, and Hennard became badly injured. He was instructed to stand down, but he didn't, and instead he turned the weapon on himself and took his own life. Police found a movie ticket stub for the Fisher King, and the fact that his actions closely mirrored the events of the film are what led authorities to believe that he was inspired by the film to do what he did. When Harry entered the restaurant, he screamed, "All the women of Killeen and Belton are vipers," and then he began firing at people while ranting and making snide remarks. Surprisingly, however, despite his intense hatred towards women, he was a known womanizer, he did let a mother and daughter flee the scene before beginning his spree. Next up, Mount Pleasant, Texas, of course. On May 10th of 1982, 3 Pizza Hut employees, Howard McLean, Shirley Thompson, and Greg Dwayne Landrum, were killed during a robbery gone wrong. The trio were closing up the restaurant when Calvin Paget and Max Daughtry entered the establishment demanding money. The problem was there was only $100 in the register. Paget and Daughtry became enraged and, in a fit of anger, fired a projectile at McLaughlin, fired at and beat Landrum, and fired at, beat, and impaled Thompson, all to death. When police arrived at the scene, the bodies of the deceased were found stashed away in the restaurant's storage area. Both Daughtry and Paget were eventually arrested. Daughtry received 30 years in prison for causing the death of Landrum, and Paget received 2 life sentences for causing the deaths of both Thompson and McLaughlin. Next up, we have the pure evil that took place in Austin, Texas, all the way back in the early 1880s. On December 30th of 1884, a black female houseworker was found dead on a patch of snow in the city. She had been impaled in the stomach, chest, arms, and legs before being struck in the head with an axe. A few months later, on May 7th of 1885, another black houseworker was found dead, struck in the head with an axe. After that, Irene Cross was found dead after being impaled several times with a large blade. Her death was then followed by the death of Mary Ramey, who was violated before being impaled through the ear, and the next was Gracie Vance and Orange Washington, beaten to death. All of the women fell under the same description. They were all black and they were all houseworkers. After that, the killings did die down, but no one was ever convicted for the deaths of the women. It is believed, however, that a fellow worker, Nathan Elgin, might have committed the crime, as it was confirmed that he was in close proximity to where most of the crime scenes during the time in which the killings would have taken place. Unfortunately, investigators were never able to question Nathan, as he was killed while trying to attack a woman with a large blade. Next up, we have San Antonio, home to the Angel of Death, Janine Jones, who was anything but an angel. Jones was adopted at birth by a nightclub owner and a former beautician. There was not much else known about her upbringing, but what is known is that eventually she became a nurse, working at the Medical Center Hospital located in San Antonio. At one point, her coworkers described her as intelligent but coarse and prone to making loud and lewd jokes. I would assume if they were asked to describe her now, they might use harsher language. In 1983, Jones was arrested and charged with killing a young woman in her care by injecting her with a toxic amount of muscle relaxant. She was sentenced to 90 years in prison. The following year, she was given another 60 years after being charged with the attempted killing of another patient, which forced authorities to take a more in-depth look into all of the deaths that occurred in the hospital during Jones's time working as a nurse, which revealed that over 60 patients Jones had access to died between the years of 1981 and 1982. In an interview with police, Jones said that it wasn't her that killed them, but rather the voices in her head. In 2019, Jones was taken to trial, once again charged with the deaths of 5 more patients. It is likely that with new evidence coming to light each and every day, Jones will be spending the rest of her life being pinballed back and forth between both the courthouse and her prison cell. And finally, to finish us off today, we have Beaumont, Texas, where in 2010 a man named Greg Flanagan took his final breath. On September 15th of that year, Flanagan was found dead on the floor of his hotel room. At first, it appeared as though he had died of natural causes, but upon closer inspection, it was revealed that was not the case. Coroners found broken ribs, massive damage to internal organs, a small cut on his frontal private area, and a blunt force injury consistent with injuries that generally occur in the event of a high-speed car crash. But his body showed no signs of bruising. It was truly baffling. The police followed many leads, but each one soon became a dead end. It wasn't until a private investigator was brought in that the case was finally solved. Greg Flanagan was killed after a projectile fired from a handheld weapon from the next room over went through the wall and entered Greg's body through his private area. That's what caused the cut, I suppose. But by then, Greg's body had already been cremated, so no further investigation could be done in that sense. However, police managed to track down the men staying in the room next to Greg the night of his death. They caved when they were questioned, they confessed, and the case was finally solved.
Number 10. White Rock Lake. White Rock Lake is an area that is filled with many legends. It's home to the ghost of the Lady of the Lake. Years ago, a young couple was driving home from a party along the lake late one night. The two were tired and ready to go home when the wife suddenly screamed at her husband to stop the car. A young woman in a long white gown had appeared in the road before them. The couple asked the woman if she needed a ride, and she accepted. They drove on, and all while the wife could hear the steady drip, drip, drip of water. But once they reached the address the woman had given them, they turned around to find her gone, leaving behind only a puddle. Confused, the couple got out at the address and knocked on the door. An elderly man answered. They told the man about the young woman they had just picked up, and he sighed and told them they were not the first couple to come knocking on his door late at night. The woman they had picked up was his daughter, who had drowned in White Rock Lake 10 years earlier. The Lady of the Lake has been spotted and even picked up many times since, and continues to haunt White Rock Lake in her white gown, looking for a way back home, and this is just sad. Number 9. Adolphus Hotel. The Adolphus Hotel was built on the former site of Dallas's original City Hall in 1912, and the hotel has a reputation as one of the city's most prominent historical landmarks. In addition to being the oldest hotel in the city, it's no surprise it's also among the most haunted. One of the most famous spirits here is an apparition who appears in a 1930s era white wedding gown, the spirit of a jilted bride who was supposed to have been married in one of the hotel's glamorous ballrooms on the 19th floor, but ended up taking her own life at the hotel instead when her groom left her at the altar. Ever since that night, guests staying on the 19th floor report hearing a woman crying, footsteps running up and down the hall, and even the sound of rope creaking under the strain of a body. The bride spirit has been spotted wandering the halls after events and parties, still wearing her white dress and veil. Again, this is just incredibly sad. Staff and guests of the hotel also report report an eerie feeling of being watched or of a presence in the room with them. Now, not all ghost residents have sad backstories, as many are believed to be former guests who checked in again during the afterlife because they had such a good time in the hotel back in their days among the living. Guess it's a cool place to be in life and death. Number 8. The Coombs Creek Trail. Located in Oak Cliff, this trail offers a serene, scenic path along Coombs Creek for nature lovers to enjoy, but everything is not as it seems, as this trail has an eerie history. Years ago, a young girl named Mary would ride her bike every day along the trail, but one day Mary never returned home. It's still unknown whether Mary drowned in the creek, was struck by a passing train, or was taken, but she seems to have disappeared without a trace. Hikers still report seeing the figure of a young girl riding her bike dangerously close to the edge of the water, but when they call out to warn her, she vanishes into thin air. Others have reported seeing a small ghostly face of a young girl peeking at them from behind a tree. When they try to move closer to investigate, the face disappears. Then the face reappears further along the trail, inviting the hiker to follow her deeper and deeper into the woods. And if a ghost child is trying to get me to go deeper in the woods, I'm just gonna turn around and leave. Number 7. The Majestic Theater. The Majestic Theater is located on Elm Street in downtown Dallas. Elm Street? No, I've seen that movie before. Now, in the 1910s, it housed live vaudevillian performances before transitioning to screening films in 1922. The Majestic remained in business until the 1970s, and then its doors were reopened for live performances in 1983 after it landed on the National Register of Historic Places. Some say the theater's original owner, Carl Hopitzel, still haunts the building, making sure things run according to his liking. One former employee claims he shared an office space with Carl during his time there. He reports that one of his responsibilities each night was to ensure that the door in his office leading to the theater was locked, but each morning when he showed up for work, the door was wide open, and a strange chill would permeate from the room. When he mentioned this to his manager, he laughed and explained that this was only Carl, who liked to use the door to get into the theater and check up on things. Weird smells, stage props inexplicably moving, and a light hanging above the balcony illuminating on its own have all been attributed to Carl. His spirit is rumored to linger there to this day, making sure his theater runs smoothly and maybe catching a show or two. Number 6. Snuffers Restaurant on Greenville Avenue. Snuffers is a popular local chain that serves classic American food, or at least that's what it says when I Google it. But the location on Greenville Avenue serves up a lot more than just burgers. Customers and staff of the Dallas restaurant claim that the place is seriously haunted. Before Snuffers, there was an easy parlor. It seems that a man was badly injured after hours when a fight broke out at an employee party. He then stumbled into the bathroom where he drew his final breaths. Years later, once Easy Parlor became Snuffers, the managers would sit at a table by the bathrooms each night to finish up closing paperwork. As they sat in the dark, near empty restaurant, they would listen as antagonized, stumbling footsteps made their way to the bathroom, then watch as the door creaked open by itself and never shut. In 2013, the original building was demolished and reconstructed, but reports of strange happenings didn't stop. Other employees have since reported feeling cold gusts of wind rush by them and doors slamming shut all on their own. Sounds like a dinner and a show to me. Number 5. Flagpole Hill. Just adjacent to White Rock Lake is a road leading to the infamous Flagpole Hill, the rumored location of a band of rock-hurdling poltergeists. Yep, you heard that right, they just throw rocks at you. Passerbys report driving through the area late at night only to be pelted by a rain of pebbles. When they got out of the car to chase down the culprits, there were none to be found. Local legend identifies the ghost as 3 restless spirits tangled in the dark history of the area. According to the story, a construction worker ended their own life in the house on Flagpole Hill before its completion, and a hired hitman was later convicted of taking out the couple who occupied it. Now, don't think just because you're not in a car, you're safe. Those walking on foot rather than driving past seem to be just as unlucky. Hikers and other residents of the area have reported an unseen assailant pelting them with rocks as they pass by. Sounds like this place really rocks. Get it? Because So funny. Number 4. The Millermore Mansion. Located in Dallas Heritage Village is Millermore Mansion. It was completed in 1857 and was the home of William Brown Miller, who served in the Confederate Army. This beautiful home is said to be haunted by an unidentified lady ghost who always seems to lurk near the nursery. Now, the general belief of who the lady is the spirit of a woman named Emma. Now, Emma was the 3rd wife of William Brown Miller, and allegedly everyone who encounters Emma tells a similar story. People see a woman going up the stairs and they describe the same woman, always wearing a long brown dress. She has been seen in the front foyer, and people claim to have seen her in the middle window where the nursery is. Many Millermore visitors have also reported unexplained cold spots and a distinct feeling of being watched during their visit. Seems like Emma is always watching. Number 3. Sons of Herman Hall. Herman Hall's website marks itself as the oldest freestanding wood structure in Dallas, as well as the oldest bar. And for over 100 years, the hall has held concerts, parties, and dances. So no wonder the dead come back there to party. Both staff members and guests of the hall have reported strange occurrences, especially in late hours of the night. Some guests have seen paintings fly off the wall as thrown by some unseen force. Others have heard footsteps in the hallways and seen doors suddenly slam shut. Guests also claim to hear children laughing, even when no children were present, which is just creepy. Longtime staff members of Herman Hall report sensing a lingering presence and seeing flashes of light and shadow. One particular staff member recounts a time he and some other employees saw a couple dressed in Victorian-era clothing walk past them and go upstairs, but about 30 minutes later, when the couple hadn't returned, the staff went upstairs to find all the doors locked and no one inside them. I just think these ghosts want to return to their party days though. Number 2. Goatman's Bridge. Goatman's Bridge, more formally known as the Old Alton Bridge in Argyle. Dating back to the 1930s, locals have told tales of the specter of a strange half-man, half-goat creature lurking beneath the bridge. The Goatman is said to stand over 7 feet tall with big horns and glowing red eyes, which to me just sounds like the devil, but I mean, hey, Goatman is a cool name. Some believe the Goatman remains dormant for years at a time and awakes only to hunt for prey. Now, the Goatman isn't the only spirit on this bridge, as to keep him company is another spirit, that of a young mother crying out eternally for her lost child. Residents making their way over the bridge late at night have reported hearing her ghostly wails. Some say the two ghosts are connected, and that years ago the Goatman stole the young woman's baby. When she found out, she threw herself from the bridge, and her spirit has haunted it ever since. Now, I already don't like bridges because of heights and being over bodies of water, but being on a haunted bridge, no thank you. And coming in at number 1 is Miss Molly's Hotel. Located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Miss Molly's Hotel is a little deceiving. In the lawless pioneer days of the Old West, Miss Molly's operated as a bordello, making working girls and their customers among the most common apparitions to appear here. One such customer even has a room named after him, the Cowboy Room, where he has been frequently spotted by guests and staff of the hotel. His name is Jake the Cowboy, and when Paula Goins became manager of Miss Molly's, she had no clue that it was haunted. After months, she reported that strange things started happening, and she eventually saw Jake herself. She said, "I saw him in full body. He walked into a room and shut the door behind him, and I went up and knocked on the door and opened the door and no one was there. That is when I knew that something was up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I know I'm not crazy." Another ghost there is assumed to be a former madame by the name of Josie King. Some suspect that she oversaw the house during its bordello days. Josie is seen a lot, usually at 3 a.m. at the foot of the bed, and allegedly Josie likes to watch people sleep. No thanks. Guests can also look at the hotel's collection of creepy photographs or listen to eerie audio recordings captured through the years. Starting us off at number 10 is a creepy cemetery. A drone video that was posted by the TikTok user Haunted by the Darkness starts off exploring a creepy cemetery in the middle of the night. And I mean, what could go wrong there? The camera starts panning the headstone-filled grounds, but at first nothing seems to be really out of the ordinary. In fact, for most of the video, it's actually just the drone panning over the cemetery and showing the old graves, which, to be fair, is creepy all by itself. However, near the end of the video, things get weird. There is this kind of shadow figure that appears to be crouched over, and then it suddenly bolts off into the distance. It's a bit blurry, so it's pretty hard to tell if it's a person or what, but it definitely has made some people online a little uneasy, with some claiming it's a ghost and others fearing it could be some kind of occult practicing witch. Now, creepiness of the video aside, I do have some questions. If it was a drone filming this, why not chase whatever that was? I mean, that part is a little suspicious to me, that's all I'm saying. But it's definitely still a creepy video and has definitely cemented my stance on never visiting a cemetery after dark. Coming in at number 9, killer clowns. So one thing about me is I hate clowns. I always have. They just creep me out, plain and simple. So for me, one of the creepiest things I could think of would be coming across a clown wandering the street late at night. I mean, maybe I'm just scarred from the time when people were dressed as clowns running around on rampant sprees in the middle of the night, but I would also guess I'm not alone in this fear. Well, 2 friends came across exactly that one night while driving home in El Paso, Texas. They claimed they were filming to begin with because they were freestyling in the car, but then out of nowhere, the driver sees a clown standing on the side of the road. The camera gets a little shaky, and you can hear the passenger not believing his friend when he claims to have seen this creepy clown. But then the camera gets back on the road, and after turning up the headlights, there it is standing in the middle of the road. A creepy clown dressed in all black with a white mask on. If that were not alarming enough, the clown then starts running towards the car, but from there the camera gets super shaky again and abruptly ends, so we don't know what happens next. I will be honest, I have no idea if this is real or not. Some say it is, but others claim it's a hoax. I mean, you know, people have dressed up as clowns and stood in the middle of the road waiting to attack people? Sure, but this one in particular, the jury is out. One thing I do know though, is that I still hate clowns. Coming in at number 8, a late night drive. This next video was posted on TikTok, and the user started off by explaining that it was getting late and they wanted to get home quickly, so they decided to take an alternate route home that was suggested to them by Google Maps. I mean, you would think that would be completely harmless, and probably in most cases it would be, but this video is definitely making some people stressed, and I don't blame them. The user claims they started recording the video as they had just passed a huge group of deer, but then continued recording as things started to get shifty when a van that was passing them on the other side of the road apparently slowed down, turned around, and started following our TikTok friend. Then, as they show in the video, the user begins to slow down because they see something strange on the side of the road and they're trying to figure out what it is. As they approach the object, they begin to panic as the van behind them is getting closer and closer. And I mean, while we don't know for sure what that thing is that's on the side of the road, it doesn't really look like a legal situation. Then lastly, the user speeds away and the video ends, so we don't really know what happened after that. Online, lots of people are saying it could be a dead body, but others were claiming this is apparently some kind of kidnapping technique that people use to try and get people out of their cars. I mean, who knows? We have no idea what it was. Let's just hope it's not as bad as it seems. Coming in at number 7 are playing ghosts. In Seguin, Texas lies the terrifyingly haunted Magnolia Hotel. Now, if you are a Most Amazing fan, then I'm sure you are not surprised that there is some creepy footage from a hotel, because, well, hotels may as well be breeding grounds for spirits considering how many haunted hotels are alive and well in North America. This particular video was posted by the owners of the hotel, and they claim that it's footage of 2 ghosts in the room playing with a toy they purchased for them. It starts off with some kind of flashing light on the floor going berserk, followed by a sort of ball thing that begins rolling around the room, seemingly all on its own. I mean, I don't know many other explanations other than maybe the wind that could explain away something like that, but from what I can tell, doesn't look like the wind is moving it. Now, the curtains are closed, so we can't see if the window is open, but even so, wouldn't the curtains move if the wind was blowing past them? Let's just hope that whatever it is that's inside that hotel room is a benevolent entity, because otherwise this hotel could be in for some serious trouble. Next up at number 6, a mysterious creature. Posted to YouTube in June of 2022, this video was not just creepy and inexplicable to the general public, it even became a news story across the entire country. Apparently, this strange creature that is being called Wolfman was caught on camera walking around the Amarillo Zoo in Texas, and no one can figure out what the heck it is. According to city officials, it is real and not doctored footage, but that kind of just makes it even more concerning. It doesn't appear to be any kind of animal we are familiar with, and it's certainly not a human either, at least no one thinks so at this point. This UAO, or Unidentified Amarillo Object as it's being called, has people up in arms, with some saying it's a chupacabra, the absolutely horrific folklore creature that's said to live in the southern United States and attack and devour livestock, but that's not the only theory circulating the internet. There are conspiracy theories that it's an evil alien coming to Earth, that it's a skinwalker, or that it's even some kind of Sasquatch. But honestly, I just hope that whatever it is, it comes in peace. Coming in at number 5, a vortex ghost. It's not just creepy ghosts playing with toys you can find at the horrifically haunted Magnolia Hotel. There is apparently a whole slew of ghosts who have been caught on camera, each as terrifying as the last. This particular video came about while conducting a public investigation of the hotel back in 2017, and it is definitely unlike anything I have ever seen. The first sign that there is something in the room is when a small puff of black mist appears in the bottom left corner. Then again, the same mist of black appears this time, morphing into what can only be described as a white, almost vortex that sweeps up in front of the camera lens. Next, a small orb of light zips up and away, and another vortex follows it. And this white mist continues to circulate the room for a while until it's suddenly gone. Some commenters have said it looks like it could even be two entities hugging, while others claim that it's more likely a frustrated ghost zipping around the room looking for something, or maybe even someone. Now, could this really be proof of a ghost? I mean, maybe? What else really could it be? There is no one else in the room from what we can tell, and it matches a lot of descriptions of what investigators claim entities look like, not to mention the reputation of this hotel is an extremely haunted one. Like always, if it is a ghost, let's just hope it's not an evil demon coming to wreak havoc. Coming in at number 4, a UFO. This next video was posted to TikTok last year after a woman behind the camera noticed a strange flickering light appear in the sky. She starts off explaining that she is standing at her window by her house and clarifies that there is no way it could be any kind of glare when she adjusts the camera down, proving that the house lights are pointing down. But things get extra creepy when the camera pans back up in front of her and it appears that the flickering light is not only up in the sky, but on the ground in front of her a few dozen feet away. From there, it's a lot of zooming in and out on the suspect UFO in the sky until all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it appears like it begins moving around in the sky until suddenly, without a trace, it disappears into the night. What's especially wild about this is, according to the text on the video, this is the second night in a row this orb of light has appeared near her house in the sky. Which, if all of this turns out to be true, do they know she is watching them? As you can imagine, people online wasted no time confirming her suspicions that it was in fact an alien spaceship. However, there are a few pointing out that it could have merely been a street lamp. That being said, she took a video the following day showing the grounds where she lives, and at least from what she is showing us, there is no street lamp anywhere close to where the alleged UFO was the night before. What do you think? Could it really be an alien spaceship in the sky? Coming in at number 3, a stairwell entity. Once again, another hotel makes it on the list. This one, however, is said to be an extended stay hotel in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, we all know there is a lot of paranormal footage out there, but how much of it comes from hotel security cameras? While this video is short, that doesn't make it any less alarming. The video is split into 2 frames, the one on the left showing an orb of light near the wall, which, as far as paranormal sightings go, is pretty much the calling card for a ghostly entity being around. That being said, if that was all it was, it could easily be explained away as an actual light. It's the right frame of the video where things get especially unsettling. When, in what seems to be the bottom of a stairwell inside the hotel, an inexplicable white smoky blur is caught traveling across the room before seemingly disappearing through a wall. Not only that, but it kind of looks as though it's walking on legs, which is wild. People all over were straight up terrified as to what or who this entity could be, and if it's dangerous or not. But so far, no such sighting has come up since. For everyone's peace of mind, let's just hope it was a spirit simply passing through. Coming in at our number 2 spot, another UFO. One night while out walking, two friends came across a strange sight in the sky in Austin, Texas. One of them started filming when he noticed that there were 5 distinct bright lights that appeared to all be connected. They ended up sending the video into Fox 7 News and explaining that while they didn't consider themselves believers of alien life before that night, this encounter was making them second guess that belief. Plus, a witness of the alleged UFO sighting in a different part of town claimed it was completely silent, which she thought was extremely odd and immediately made her think it was some kind of alien spaceship. The craziest part of the whole video, however, is when the 5 lights literally zoom away into the distance at an incredibly high speed. I mean, I can safely say I have never seen anything like this in my entire life. It looks like it's out of Star Wars or something. And if it were me, I would definitely be questioning what I just saw. Now, there have been some skeptics claiming this could be some kind of drone light show, which, I mean, could be true. The drone expert they got for the Fox 7 interview certainly seems to think it must have been a drone, but a lot of other commenters who claim to be experts have also made it very clear that a speed like the one seen in the video is not a technology that is yet available to any drone we have here on Earth. I mean, look, I don't know enough about drones to know how fast they can or can't go, but to me, that video is extremely suspicious. And last up in our number 1 spot, an alien abduction. There are a lot of scary things that could happen to you in this world, but maybe one of the most terrifying things I can imagine would be being abducted by aliens. And this video found from a doorbell security camera from a property in Porter, Texas, just might be living proof of my fear. The video is quick, simply showing a man leaving his house at night, but as he is walking away, the video briefly glitches and pauses. Next thing you know, there is a spark of light that shoots up into the air from exactly where he was standing, and the man is gone without a trace. Once this video got out there, conspiracy theorists pretty much fell into one of 2 beliefs. Either the man was abducted by aliens, or that he himself is an alien. Now, I will admit, both of these are a little far-fetched. Realistically, this could just be a weird camera glitch, but I mean, it's definitely some strange footage with little to no explanation. So, I mean, technically, the possibilities of what could be happening are still up for debate.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Margaret Lorraine Smith. Starting off this list with one of the craziest stories on it, Margaret is quite a dangerous woman. She actually is charged with hiring a man to kill her own husband, George Smith. On August 6th, 2007, it is said that she hired a man and lured her husband to Surfside Beach late at night. She left George sitting in the sand as the man she hired carried out her evil, horrible plan. Both Margaret and the man she hired were both indicted on these charges in September of 2007. While the hired man was convicted, Margaret herself has been running from her own actions since August 11th, 2009. She fled while on bond awaiting the start of her trial. We could ask ourselves all day why she was allowed to be released on bond for such a horrific crime, but at the end of the day, it won't help anyone find her. She was last seen on video at a Walmart in San Antonio getting into a maroon 4-door sedan. There are many rewards being offered for anyone who can provide tips that lead to her arrest, and authorities have also released age-progressed photos to show what she may look like now. Hopefully at some point she is caught and brought to justice for the horrible thing that she did. In our number 9 spot today, we have Israel Aguirre. Israel was first arrested in 2002 on the charges of theft as well as being charged for taking someone's life. He was convicted of his theft charge in 2003 and served times at a corrections facility for it. After his sentence was finished, he was deported from the United States before standing trial for the charge related to the killing. In 2005, however, he was arrested once again in Dallas, this time for a different crime as well as for failure to identify himself. He pled no contest and was released on bond. He made a few different court appearances between 2005 and 2007, but eventually he disappeared. On September 9th, 2007, the Kaufman County Sheriff's Office issued a warrant for his arrest for the killing, but he has yet to be seen. In our number 8 spot today, we have Troy James Allison. Born in Houston, Texas in 1953, Troy has quite a criminal history, including convictions in 1973 and 1976 for some very serious crimes. In 1977, he was convicted of a horrifying crime following an incident involving a 22-year-old female. For this, he received a 75-year sentence, which he served up until he was paroled in 2000. 2003. Since 2004, however, he has been on the run. He was last seen in the Lufkin area but is still wanted for his parole violation as well as failing to comply with orders to register as a sex offender. The Most Wanted website lists his past employment history as he's had jobs as a pipe fitter, welder, and a meat cutter. In our number 6 spot today we have Susan O'Connor. About a month and a half ago, a woman was arrested and it was found out that she had been on the run for years. 54-year-old Susan O'Connor was pulled over on October 28th for speeding, but what the officers found was more than they likely could have ever imagined. As it turned out, Susan was on the run since 2009 when she fled with her then 3-year-old son. Her fingerprints confirmed her true identity and she was charged. For 14 years, Susan's son was listed as a missing person, but with Susan being found, the now 17-year-old was finally reunited with his father. It appears as though the reason Susan fled in the first place was to disrupt and interfere with some sort of custody issue that she was having at the time. Susan is now being held at the Collin County Detention Facility in McKinney on warrants for failure to appear and interference with child custody. Her bond has been set at $100,000, and if convicted, she likely will face time in prison. In our number 5 spot today, we have Jose Fernando Bustos Diaz. Back in 2005, Jose was working on a ranch as a hand at the Oaks of Kendallwood Stables, which were located in northwest Harris County. As he worked here, he made the terrible decision to take someone's life. He pleaded guilty to the crime once caught and received a 35-year sentence for it. On April 6, 2010, however, this story spun even more out of control when he escaped from his prison unit approximately 70 miles southwest of San Antonio. On that day, the sheriff's office and the jail both issued warrants for his arrest regarding the escape, and on April 13th, the U.S. Marshals Service issued another one pertaining to unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Many people believe that he may have managed to flee the country entirely, but at this point, anyone's guess could possibly be correct. In our number 3 spot today, we have Brandon Hogan. Brandon has landed himself a spot on the Texas 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list, the most amazing top 10 most wanted fugitives list. He is said to have ties to Coryell County, which includes both the cities of McGregor as well as Gatesville, Texas. The reason he is on the most wanted list is because in 2007 he was convicted of harming someone and it caused a bodily injury, and because of this he received 5 years probation. His probation, however, didn't last long. It was actually revoked the following year and he was instead sentenced to 5 years confinement. In August of this year, however, Brandon was arrested for theft of firearm, burglary of a habitation, assault, and criminal mischief. On September 26, 2002, he escaped from his work crew station and since then has been on the run. In our number 2 spot today, we have Matthew Edgar. Born in 1996, although young, Matthew has quite the history when it comes to run-ins with the law. In 2015, Matthew was convicted of evading arrest as well as causing serious bodily injury, and as a result of this, he was sentenced to 3 years of confinement and 3 years of probation. In 2020, things took a way darker turn, however, when he was arrested for taking someone's life. In 2021, he was subsequently arrested for harming a family/household member, which appears to have been by way of impeding their ability to breathe. Earlier this year in January, he was attending his initial days of the trial that was in relation to him taking someone's life before he fled on January 26, 2022. He did end up being convicted in absentia and has been sentenced to 99 years confinement. On January 27, 2022, just a day after he fled, a warrant was issued for his arrest, and hopefully he soon is found so that he can serve the sentence he received from the judge. In our number 1 spot today, we have Patrick Carrier. 3 of the Texas 10 most wanted fugitives quite recently were finally found and brought back into custody, and Patrick is just one of them. After fleeing, Patrick was finally caught and was arrested in Houston on November 21st. He initially was in trouble in 1993 when he was convicted of a killing and received a 45-year sentence for that crime. In 2013, he was convicted again for possession of an illicit substance and was sentenced to 6 months confinement, but was released released on parole in October of 2020. This turned out to be a mistake, however, as he totally disappeared, completely violating the terms of his parole, and with a violent history that is a major cause for concern. At the beginning of 2021, in January, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles issued a warrant for his arrest for a parole violation, and then in March, just a few months later, the Harris County Sheriff's Office issued a warrant for his arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Thankfully, this is one person on this list who was found so that they can finish serving the sentence that they were given.
In the vast, untamed wilderness of Texas, whispers of a fearsome creature known as the Wampus Cat have echoed through the ages. Countless locals hailing from remote towns and ranches claim to have encountered this enigmatic cryptid, leaving an indelible mark on the region's folklore. Descriptions of the Wampus Cat vary, but a common thread weaves throughout. It's a creature with the body of a monstrous feline, possessing sleek black fur that glistens under the moonlight. Its piercing, glowing eyes pierce through the darkness, striking fear into the hearts of those who dare to gaze upon it. As diverse as the Lone Star State itself, some say the Wampus Cat prowls silently in the dense pine forests of East Texas, emitting blood-curdling cries that reverberate through the night. Others claim to have witnessed the creature sprinting across open plains, leaving behind a trail of shattered trees and trampled earth. The bravest souls speak of unsettling encounters near secluded water sources where the Wampus Cat is said to drink, its presence sending wildlife scattering in terror. Those who have encountered the Wampus Cat speak of an uncanny primal energy emanating from the creature. Its presence is said to invoke an inexplicable sense of dread, as if crossing paths with an otherworldly force deeply rooted in the untamed heart of Texas. Whether the Wampus Cat is an embodiment of ancient Native American legends or a creature yet to be fully understood, we still don't know. Number 9, the Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is a legendary creature that has gained notoriety throughout the world. Sightings reported across Latin America, the United States. The creature is described as having a reptilian or canine-like appearance with large fangs and a pronounced spine along its back. It's said to prey on livestock, draining their blood and leaving behind a trail of carnage. One of the most famous encounters occurred in Texas, however, when a woman named Phyllis Canyon discovered what she believed to be the remains of the creature on the side of a road. Canyon was initially skeptical of reports of the Chupacabra, but was pretty convinced of its existence after discovering this bizarre carcass. She had also found several of her chickens dead on her property around the time she found this strange animal. Canyon's discovery sparked quite a media frenzy, with reports and cryptid enthusiasts from around the world jumping in excitement. While some skeptics dismissed the creature as a coyote or other known animal, Canyon maintained that its appearance was unlike anything she had ever seen before, and it definitely could be some sort of wild dog with mange or something, but either way, pretty gnarly looking animal. In 2001, a 19-year-old driving in Pennsylvania reported seeing a bird-like creature with a wingspan of 10 to 15 feet, and it had an elongated head. Two other witnesses later reported seeing similar creatures in the same area, and all of this was very reminiscent of sightings in Texas in 1976 and 82 that were also described as looking sort of like an ancient pterosaur. These sightings in Texas occurred near the location where the fossil of a large pterosaur was first discovered. And what was most fascinating about these sightings, right, they seemed to have occurred close together in waves, so it seems like people were really seeing something. One possible explanation could be the frigate bird, which can have a wingspan of up to 8 feet. Frigate birds tend to soar for long periods and only land to tend to their young. At number 7, we have Sasquatch, because these things are everywhere, apparently. Everyone has their own version of this big hairy beast. So look, Sasquatch needs no introduction, but I'm gonna give the big hairy lug one anyway. The Sasquatch, or Bigfoot as he's commonly known, is basically the ultimate celebrity cryptid. Everyone knows who he is, but nobody has actually seen him in person or have they? Apparently, Texas is home to many Bigfoot sightings. It seems that he's been spotted more than a few times wandering around in the woods. Some people claim that he's up to 10 feet tall, because everything is bigger in Texas, covered in hair, and smells like a wet dog. Others say that he's more of a gentle giant who just wants to be left alone. All I know is there really are Bigfoot roaming around in the wilderness of Texas. They gotta be just sweltering hot with all that fur. Up next, we have the skunk ape. Oh boy, do I love the skunk ape. The skunk ape is a legendary cryptid that is mostly seen in Florida, but there have also been numerous sightings in Texas and a couple other states. This creature is similar to Bigfoot, but it is said to have a distinct odor. That's the name. And it also likes hanging around swamps. That's where most apes tend to hang out in nature. Many people have claimed to have seen this elusive creature, and some even have photographic evidence to support their claims. In 2000, a series of photos surfaced taken by a woman on her back porch that showed what appeared to be a skunk ape walking through a swampy area, and I have always loved these photos. Yes, it could definitely be an escaped orangutan or something, but it's pretty freaky nonetheless. And if it is a costume, which I really don't think it is, it's got to be a pretty damn good one. The photos were taken in Florida, but it's not surprising that there have been sightings in Texas as well. After all, Texas is a vast state with plenty of forests and wilderness areas where a creature like the skunk ape could hide. Despite the many sightings and alleged evidence, there are still skeptics who don't believe in the existence of skunk ape, but for those who have seen it or have smelt its distinctive odor, there's no denying there is something strange and mysterious lurking in the swamps and woods, Florida and Texas. The black-eyed children. Black-eyed children are a mysterious and creepy phenomenon that have captivated the attention of paranormal enthusiasts for years. The supposed sightings involve encountering children with completely black eyes, just no sclera in there, and they seem to appear out of nowhere and ask to be let into people's homes or vehicles. Sometimes they ask you to help them with a small favor, but their true intentions are sinister because they have pure black eyes. Some people believe these children are demonic or extraterrestrial in origin, while others believe they are simply a creepy urban legend. The first written account of the black-eyed children, or at least the most famous, came from Texas reporter Brian Bethel in 1996. Bethel shared his experience of encountering two children with completely black eyes while sitting in his car. Since Bethel's account, numerous reports of black-eyed children have emerged, with many claiming to have reported feeling a sense of dread and unease when encountering these mysterious rascals. And I think I know why people feel a little off seeing these kids. Their eyes are pure black. That would do it for me. The Beast of Bears. The Beast of Bears is a cryptid that is said to roam the wilds of Texas, resembling a large, scarred-up bear with missing patches of fur. It's rumored to live near swamps, adding to the creature's mysterious allure. Some even say that it has gills, making it a truly unique and peculiar creature. What kind of bizarre mashup of things is this? Goatman apparently has gills too, so why are all these big, hairy Texas monsters also aquatic? Anyway, the Beast of Bears also boasts large red eyes like those of the Mothman, which only adds to the intrigue surrounding this cryptid. The first sighting of the Beast of Bears was in 1973 at a camping spot near the town of Alice, Texas. Since then, over 31 sightings have been reported, with the most recent being in a backyard outside Crestview, Florida. However, the Beast of Bears is most closely associated with Texas. Many reports of sightings coming from various parts of the state. Despite skeptics dismissing the Beast of Bears as a hoax, there is evidence to suggest that the creature may be real. Even a drawing of the creature suggests that it may be found not only in Texas, but also up in Canada. Some have even linked the Beast of Bears to Inuit stories about giant bears that drag people underwater and eat them. And coming in at number 2, the Lake Worth Monster. The Lake Worth Monster, also known as the famous Goatman, is a cryptid that has long captivated the attention of Texans. Sightings of the creature creature began in the summer of 1969, when a group of people reported encountering a strange half-man, half-goat-like creature near Lake Worth, just outside of Fort Worth. Descriptions of the creature vary, but most witnesses report seeing a towering, hairy beast with a goat's head, cloven hooves, and the ability to leap great distances. Some descriptions of the strange beast, and some even describe it as having fishy scales all over its body, which don't seem to fit. But anyway, over the course of several weeks, the creature was allegedly sighted by numerous individuals, leading to a media frenzy and an increased public interest in the elusive creature. One article, written by reporter Jim Mars, was written with the, I gotta say, hilarious headline, "Fishy man-goat terrifies couple parked at Lake Worth." Love that. Some locals claimed the creature was aggressive, throwing car tires and rocks at those who stumbled upon it, while others reported it simply observing them from a distance. And finally, we have the NASA gargoyle. There have been multiple sightings of this mysterious creature, but the first reported sighting, and definitely the most famous, was from NASA employee Frank Shaw, who worked in Houston's Johnson Space Center. Shaw had reported walking back to his car after his shift and spotted what looked to be a large, winged, jet-black humanoid creature perched on one of the Space Center's buildings. Suddenly, it started unfurling its wings, which apparently made this awful crackling sound, and then it just swooped into the air. I'm picturing the creature from Jeepers Creepers here, so not pleasant. Shaw had been completely stunned, frozen in fear at the sight of whatever this beast was, but suddenly kind of snapped out of it as soon as the thing flew into the air and started making his way back to his car, where in classic horror movie fashion, he struggled to get his keys into the door. I'm picturing him just kind of like dropping them a couple times, but he finally got into his car and just flew out of there. Here's what's really interesting about this incident though. Apparently there were other employees at the station who had also had encounters with the winged monstrosity. Apparently there had been a file opened on the creature just a few months before Shaw saw it, after 2 German shepherds at the station had been found completely mutilated in the same area as Shaw's sighting, so that's pretty interesting.
Starting us off at number 10, the Elder Street Artist Lofts. Formerly a hospital, it's no surprise to anyone that these lofts are believed to be one of the most haunted locations in Houston, Texas. But it's not for the reason you may think. While of course many died in the hospital during its operation, as is totally normal, the paranormal experiences have to do with the fact that the hospital was built over a cemetery where roughly 3,000 Civil War and yellow fever victims were buried along with countless slaves. And isn't that just a recipe for disaster? At the time of construction, there was a ton of controversy as people were understandably concerned about building on top of a cemetery. So to ease the town, they built the basement above ground and left the graves undisturbed. Apparently many graves were actually relocated as well, but there was no formal sweep for remains, so who knows what was left behind. As many in the town predicted, their efforts to build on top of dead bodies did not evade the inevitable spirits from rising into the building, and over the years many have reported sightings of strange shadowy figures and feelings of being watched, only to see that no one is there. Now, many actually live in these apartments today, but let me tell you, I don't care how nice these lofts are, you couldn't pay me to live in a building where ghosts were known to roam around the halls. Next up at number 9, Al Engineering Building. Back in 1959, a man named Roy Sims, who was an instructor at the university, made a grave mistake that changed his life forever. Back then, it was known as the Animal Industries Building and was home to the meat locker where students would learn how to properly butcher animals. Now, this particular day, Roy went down into the basement where the meat locker was to get some work done alone. Once down there, he started carving up a pig for some bacon when suddenly the knife in his hand slipped and punctured his thigh right in his femoral artery. Alone and bleeding out, some say he dragged himself across the floor towards the elevator before he died, leaving a long trail of blood behind him. It's believed that he haunts the building to this day, with reports of people hearing strange noises and screams coming from the basement. Some have even seen apparitions or strange objects moving along the wall, and sometimes even finding unexplained dark stains on the floor of the building. Believe it or
not, some janitors have even requested to be reassigned to different areas of the building out of fear for the terrifying things they've witnessed. So enter if you dare as the basement continues to haunt all that dare to try. Next up at number 8, the Miller-Moore Mansion. Once home to wealthy plantation owners in 1861, this Dallas mansion saw more death in its lifetime than you can imagine. The mansion was owned by one William Brown Miller, and while living there, he married, divorced, and then remarried another 3 times. Sadly, 2 of Miller's wives died tragically. His second wife, Minerva, died of an unknown illness, and Emma died while in childbirth. It seems that these souls, among many others, never left the mansion and can be found terrifying all who dare to visit. Guests and staff have reported feelings of being watched in the master bedroom and strange sudden drops in temperature even in the hot summer months. Visitors say they can hear babies' screams coming from the nursery and the sound of a crib being dragged into the master bedroom. But like magic, once the crib reaches the master, suddenly the baby's cries stop immediately. And if that wasn't enough to spook you, there have been countless reports of crows flying into the glass of windows only to find ghostly appearance of a face appear. Could it be the ghost of Emma trying to care for her baby they hear? You certainly won't see me sticking around long enough to find out. Next up at number 7, the White Sanitarium. Located in Wichita Falls, the White Sanitarium, also commonly known as the Old Insane Asylum, opened in 1926 under the direction of Frank White, but became abandoned sometime in the 1950s. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea of a haunted, abandoned asylum just sounds like the start of a horror movie. I mean, it's not like the people that were sent off to live in asylums have great quality of life, and if they died there, I'm sure they had a vengeance. It is rumored that very strange experiments were conducted in the asylum, which many believe to be the root cause of the hauntings, as they believe these procedures killed many of the patients. Visitors and passers-by have reported hearing children screaming from the building, mysterious lights turning on when there was no electricity connected to the building, and a strange woman in white roaming the grounds and peering through windows, watching all that dare to walk past. Coming in at number 6, Presidio La Bahia. If there is one place that you can certainly guarantee will be haunted by spirits, it's a battlefield. In 1747, the fortress known as Presidio La Bahia was built near the San Antonio River, and it would later become the infamous place of revolutionary conflicts like the Battle of Goliad and the Goliad Massacre. As you can imagine, many soldiers died on these grounds, so it's not hard to imagine how it got its reputation as a terrifying haunted fortress. During the Goliad Massacre in 1836, 341 Texan troopers were executed by the Mexican army, and it's believed that it's these soldiers that died in battle that can be heard crying out in terror as you walk the grounds today. Visitors have reported full body apparitions all around the property, as well as hearing strange conversations in Spanish coming from thin air. The strange wailing has been caught on audio recordings, and that is enough for me to want to leave this place alone for good. The last thing I need is to be haunted by a revolutionary soldier. Coming in at number 5, the Emily Morgan Hotel. Built in 1924 in San Antonio, Texas, the building was originally designed to be a medical arts building. Complete with a crematorium and morgue, it was known to house hundreds of doctors and was considered one of the best hospitals one could visit. That was until it closed in 1976 and became an office building, and then just 10 years later, a hotel. Today, those who work at the hotel tell frequent stories of the terrifying encounters they've had, specifically in the basement. What is now the basement of the hotel was the crematorium and morgue in its days as a hospital, and it seems whoever was left in that morgue all those years ago is not yet finished with that building or anyone who dares enter. Employees claim to have seen orbs, heard screams, and been greeted by the smell of burning flesh. But it's not just the basement that will leave you running for the hills. Apparently, the 7th floor is known to have its fair share of scary spectacles. Allegedly haunted by the ghost of a bride, no one knows what her connection is to the building, but many have come into contact with her. Guests have been known to check out in the middle of the night after hearing blood-curdling screams and seeing her reflection in the mirror. And most frightening of all is that some say they've actually seen her walk through walls. So save yourself the sleepless nights and trauma and just book a different hotel if you ever plan to visit San Antonio. Coming in at number 4, the Magnolia Hotel. Back in 1840, a Texas Ranger named James Campbell built a log cabin that later expanded into a hotel. Now, this little hotel turned out to be a fairly successful little business right up until the early 1900s. But that is where the story gets dark. Most are not surprised by the haunting of the building, as not long after the log cabin was built, Campbell, the ranger who built it, was killed, leaving the property completely abandoned. With no one to oversee the property, who knows what shady people made their way in, or worse, who didn't make it out. When it was purchased in 2013 by a couple looking to bring the building back to life, it did not take them long to figure out that this place was horrifyingly haunted. The couple said they began experiencing supernatural events as soon as repairs commenced and claimed to have heard doors slamming out of nowhere, witnessing shadowy outlines hovering in doorways, and even have photos showing strange figures climbing out of mirrors. Ugh. Since its doors opened to the public, visitors from all around the world have experienced the same strange paranormal occurrences, and there have been hundreds of accounts from people saying they saw furniture move on its own and hearing strange voices when no one was around. To date, Magnolia Hotel is known to be haunted by at least 13 different spirits, but those are just the ones they've found. The real number is assumed to be much higher. Next up at number 3, Littlefield House. Although the outside may look like a beautiful fairy castle, don't let that fool you. Located in Austin, the Littlefield House is a terrifying mansion said to be haunted by Alice Littlefield, the former mistress of the house. As legend goes, Alice and George Littlefield were a beloved couple throughout all of Austin. They couldn't have their own children, but cared deeply for their nieces and nephews and paid for all 29 of them to go to university. But not all was so perfect behind closed doors. When George would leave the house to run errands, he would lock Alice in the attic, fearing she would be kidnapped in his absence and wanting to keep her safe. Well, naturally, as being locked in an attic does to a person, she began to become hysterical, and her fear of being kidnapped and killed that was instilled by her husband slowly started to drive her mad. George then died before Alice, and it seems she slipped further into hysteria until her own death. Now Alice is known to haunt the mansion, where inexplicable sounds and shrieks can be heard echoing through the house, along with stomping feet darting up and down the stairs. If you listen closely, you just might hear her playing the piano, waiting for her husband to return. Coming in at number 2, the DeSoto Hotel. Located in El Paso, the DeSoto Hotel has been the subject for many paranormal investigations through the years. The hotel has been around for over 100 years, and if you ask the locals, they prefer not to speak of it, as many get the creeps just by thinking about it. There are 3 spirits that are known to haunt the halls of the DeSoto Hotel, and investigators have captured some truly creepy evidence over the years. One of the spirits, known as the shadow in the doorway, has been captured on video lurking in the hotel's abandoned hallways, while another spirit, who's been named Sarah, is known to creepily laugh and giggle as you walk through the building. But The one you really need to be afraid of is the spirit that lives in the basement. It seems like nothing good ever happens in old creepy basements, and the DeSoto Hotel is no different. Rumored to have been used for satanic rituals in its early days as a hotel, whatever is down there does not want you to visit. While some believe the entity to be a restless spirit incapable of controlling their anger, some are convinced it's a demon. Employees and investigators have reported being pinched, growled at, scratched, hit, and even bitten by whatever is down there, and investigators have even captured what sounds like a demon answering questions on an EVP. Let's just hope that whatever is down there stays in the basement and doesn't start wandering through the rest of the building. Who knows what dangers could happen then. Coming in at number 1, the Old Park Hotel. Built back in 1886 as a lodging for cowboys in the Ballinger area, the Old Park Hotel has had a wide variety of purposes over the years, including a schoolhouse, a courthouse, and most famously, a brothel. Now a B&B and antique store you can go and see for yourself, but visitors beware, as the previous owner has reportedly identified 30 different entities present in the hotel, and it's no doubt that you'll start to experience strange paranormal sensations as soon as you enter. Patrons have reported having entire conversations with women in costume who they believe to be staff, only for them to disappear suddenly without a trace. But the worst and most scary is the spirit of the cowboy. Known to be a very angry spirit, the cowboy has been witnessed by countless guests as well as caught on camera standing menacingly in the doorway holding what appears to be a pistol. But that's not all. One paranormal investigator looking for more information on the cowboy came by and left a piece of equipment in the room to monitor the spirit. He left to go downstairs to monitor, but when he heard a large crash from upstairs, he rushed back up, only to find it completely smashed and destroyed all over the floor. Not only that, but there have been many accounts of people feeling touched or tugged or even being pushed down the stairs when no one was around them. In fact, some investigators have been so traumatized that they've checked out in the middle of the night, never to return again. Now, if a spirit can scare an investigator, then that's all the convincing I need to stay as far away as possible.
And we're starting off this list with what has been dubbed the Lover's Lane case. In 1990, a young couple, Cheryl Henry, 22, and Andy Atkinson, 21, headed out to spend the night together, but they were never seen alive again. Their bodies were found the next day in a wooded area in West Houston known as Lover's Lane. The scene was pretty horrific. There were slash wounds to both of their necks. Andy was found tied to a tree, and Cheryl was found underneath a collapsed fence. Authorities were able to take DNA samples of whoever the assailant was, but they were never able to match it to anyone, meaning most likely this guy had no criminal record. And I do say guy because of the type of DNA they obtained. Over 30 years later, this case has sadly never been solved, and whoever's responsible could still be roaming around out there. The Amber Hagerman case. Amber Hagerman, a 9-year-old girl from Arlington, Texas, was at her grandparents' house on January 13th, 1996. Her and her younger brother were out playing. Amber was on her bicycle and she started riding further and further down the road towards a grocery store. Her brother decided to turn back, but Amber never came back. She'd been taken by a man in a black van in the grocery store parking lot. There was only one witness to her abduction. An intense search effort began, with the community rallying together and law enforcement agencies mobilizing to try and find her. Sadly though, 4 days after her abduction, Amber's body was discovered in a local creek, not a long way from where she was abducted. What makes this case extra tragic is the fact that the assailant has never been found. This tragedy led Amber's mother, Donna Norris, to help establish the Amber Alert system, though, an emergency notification system designed to rapidly disseminate information about abductions to law enforcement agencies, media outlets, and the general public. That's that little ringer thing you get on your phone, the little update. The Amber Alert system has since been adopted and implemented in numerous countries around the world. So if there's anything good that came out of the case, it's that. The Icebox. In June of 1965, the residents of Houston, Texas were left in shock and confusion when the lifeless bodies of Fred and Edwina Rogers were discovered inside their own home. But what made this case truly macabre was the manner in which their bodies were found. They had been stuffed inside the family's refrigerator. The horrifying nature of the crime, coupled with the absence of any clear motive or suspects, has propelled the case into this realm of mystery. Investigations into the icebox case were met with numerous baffling elements. The lack of forced entry suggested that the assailant was either known to the victims or possessed an intricate knowledge of their routines. The home had also been meticulously cleaned after the attack, which made, gathering up evidence pretty difficult. And there was also this absence of a clear motive, which really added another layer of intrigue to it, leaving the investigators grasping at straws for answers. Over the years, theories surrounding the icebox case have circulated. Some speculate that the crime was a result of a family dispute, while others entertain the possibility that someone could have been hired to commit the act. And then, of course, there are those who hypothesize that the assailant may have simply been a deranged individual who really had no motive and attacked them completely at random. At number 5 on the list, we have the televangelist bomber. This disturbing case began back in January of 1990 when a mysterious package was sent to Lakewood Church in Houston. The daughter of Pastor John Osteen opened the package and it exploded. Luckily, she survived, but received third-degree burns and cuts to her legs and abdomen. In April of that same year, a second package was sent. This one to the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia, where a security guard named Scott Sheepers almost lost his life. The package had looked suspicious, and the TV station had received death threats before, so they were on pretty high alert in general. They put the package through an x-ray machine. Sheepers didn't spot anything out of the ordinary at first, but something about it still seemed off to him. He went to cut into part of the box before taking a couple steps back, at which point the package exploded and sending Sheepers flying to the floor. He was transported to the hospital where shrapnel was removed from his leg and he did survive. Both packages had been sent from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Until this day, the identity of the sender has never been found. Number 4, Sam Bass's treasure. Alright, Sam Bass was this notorious outlaw during the late 1800s. He was known for his daring train robberies. According to the lore, Bass and his gang managed to accumulate quite a substantial fortune through their criminal activities, amassing a hidden treasure that till this day has never been fully recovered. The whereabouts of Bass's treasure has remained a mystery, fueling countless treasure hunting expeditions and inspiring countless stories and speculations. Many believe that Bass buried his loot in various locations across Texas, particularly in the areas around Denton where he operated. Some claim that Bass left cryptic clues and treasure maps, teasing treasure hunters with the possibility of finding his hidden riches. Over the years, numerous treasure seekers have dedicated themselves to try and unravel the secrets of the whereabouts of his treasure. They have combed through historical records, studied old maps, and explored the Texas landscape in search of his stash. Despite their efforts, though, the treasure has never been found. It's kind of like a Western version of One Piece. I love it. The thing is, though, I think if someone did find it, would they report it? Or would they just kind of keep it to themselves? I don't know. Maybe someone has found it. At number 3, we have the case of Lori Ruff. Lori Ruff was this woman with a seemingly ordinary existence, although she was always rather secretive about her past. And her husband, Blake Ruff, had a lot of questions, and as it would turn out, she wasn't exactly who she seemed. In 2010, she ended up taking her secrets to the grave after taking her own life, leaving behind a trail of these perplexing clues and unanswered questions. Blake Ruff discovered a lockbox in her closet that only added to his confusion surrounding her past. It seemed as if Lori previously went by the name Becky Sue Turner. But Becky Sue Turner was the name of a girl who had died in a house fire back in 1971. So Ruff was left in kind of utter shock, confusion. Who was this woman he'd married back in 2003? Investigators were on the case, and as it turned out, Becky wasn't her only other name. Lori was actually born as Kimberly McLean, who had gone missing in 1986. She had run away from home at 18 years old. The question still remains, though, why did she leave home, and how did she acquire the birth certificate of a girl who died in 1971. At number 2, we have the Marfa Lights. The mystery surrounding the Texas Marfa Lights has fascinated locals and visitors alike for decades. Nestled in the remote desert landscape near the town of Marfa, these unexplained phenomena manifest as strange floating orbs of light that appear in the night sky. Witnesses have described them as glowing orbs of various colors ranging from white, yellow to blue and red. The lights often dance and dart and hover in the distance, defying all conventional explanations. Numerous theories have been proposed, of course, to explain the origin of these lights, but none of them have actually been able to fully unravel it. Some speculate that they are the result of natural occurrences like atmospheric gases or reflections from distant headlights. Others attribute them, of course, to supernatural or extraterrestrial origin, believing that they are the work of ghosts or alien visitations. Skeptics argue that the lights are simply the, product of illusions or, misinterpretations. But there's quite the allure behind it, and it's led to the establishment of viewing areas and research centers dedicated to studying and observing them. Scientists, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious visitors flock to the region in search of answers. That's something I'd like to see. I might have to take a trip to Texas, find some treasure, see some cool lights. It'll be a good time.